Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Courtney Gardner. I'm a partner marketing coordinator here at Perficient, and I'm excited to welcome you all to our Oracle Financial Consolidation and Close customer panel. We do ask that everyone please mute themselves and leave video sharing to the speakers. If you have any questions throughout today's event, please feel free to pop them into the chat. I'd now like to introduce you all to today's speakers. We have Richard Ng. Richard is a director at Cardtronics and is responsible for the oversight and enhancement of Oracle EPM Hyperion products. He provides finance, project, implementation plans, and technical advice on Hyperion products. John Oliphant is a financials lead director at Allegis Group and has 14 years of IT and financials experience. He has implemented, developed on, and administered planning, HFM, SBase, and other various applications over the last 9 years. Rich Wilkie is a financial software professional with experience in product management, pre-sales, and product readiness. He currently leads a team of product managers involved in driving enhanced enterprise performance management functionality throughout product offerings. Priyakant Rami has 20 years of experience in IT, finance, and HR solutions. His past work has covered installation and configuration, upgrades, and new implementations of Oracle EPM products in all major operating systems. So now I'd like to tell you all a little bit about Perficient. Perficient's a global digital consultancy founded in 1997. We currently have over 40 locations worldwide with a projected revenue of over 700 million. What we're most proud of, though, is our 90% business repeat rate. This is a great testament to customer success and our customer loyalty. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Rami to discuss our Oracle practice. Rami?
Thank you, Courtney. Welcome, everybody, to this panel. Real quick, let me talk a little bit about the Oracle practice, specifically from a Perficient's perspective. We are not just a boutique firm that does just EPM. We have a wide range of practice within the Oracle area where we do ERP, supply chain, human capital management, obviously all the different EPM components, analytics, and we also do trainings, customized training specific to Oracle components. We also work across different industries, healthcare, oil and gas, consumer products, all of different kind of industries. So we have a lot of different areas that we cover with our Oracle practices from that perspective. Specifically from a EPM standpoint, EPM practice has been within Perficient has been around for 20 plus years. We specialize in pretty much every EPM product that is out there, and we've done thousands of implementation and deployments and upgrades and so on and so forth. So that's a little bit about the Perficient Oracle practice. You guys got a little bit of introduction for all the participants on this call. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what this panel is, right? What we really want to cover here is not something like a success story or something like what we did during the implementation and things like that. What we really want to cover today is a viewpoint of a couple of different organizations from a extended usage of FCCS or Cloud Consolidation product from the Oracle EPM suite. We had one more participant, John Holman from CVR. Unfortunately, he's not able to attend today. But we will cover a little bit of the CVR components as we are talking about the different components on the FCCS side. So, the basic idea here is to have a flowing conversation with Richard and John here about what their experience has been with FCCS, being in a long-term usage of FCCS, the kind of challenges that you come across, and so on and so forth. Well, with that, I'm going to give Richard a little bit of time to kind of introduce himself and talk about the company at Cardtronics and a little bit about his FCCS implementations.
Thanks, Rami. Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Ng. I think Courtney has introduced myself earlier with some of my background, so I'm not going to go back and go through all of that again. But just to give you a little bit about who is Cardtronics and what we do. So Cardtronics now is part of NCR, and we acquired by NCR back in last year around July timeframe. So we are a subsidiaries under NCR right now, but the business hasn't changed. We still, helping customer, just to monitor and manage and maintain all the different ATM programs. So we are a worldwide company, and we have operation in U.S., Canada, Mexico, Germany, and South Africa and Australia. And we dispense over 53 billion in cash, throughout either 111,000 machines all over the world. So, but now that we are kind of under the arms of NCR, there's a lot of opportunity from all point networks and all that different service that we provide. So, I mean, sky's the limit now, just to how much we can provide as a service from NCR industry managed, I guess, from different retail, hospitality, and a banking services standpoint, see how we can provide more value to the NCR acquisition. So we implement FCCS back in 2019. So coming from HFM on-prem to cloud. So we actually implement almost all the product across all the EPM suite, from EPPCS, ARCS, EPRCS, and EDMCS. And footprint of our FCCS application, we have about 200 company codes, and then about 1,500 natural accounts that set up. And that's kind of the footprint size. And we also implement S-Base, OAKS, as part of the reporting features, I guess. So that's also always as part of our solution in back into 2019. So time flies. We've been on it 2 years, and I mean, there are a lot of story that probably we can share just to see how things are going for us.
Thanks, Richard. It's I actually almost forgot how long ago that I was there when we did the FCCS implementation. It's great to have you on the panel. I'll hand it off to John a little bit, and talk a little bit about Allegis and their environment as well. John.
Yep. Thanks, Rami. So my name is John Oliphant, and I'm the developer lead for the EPM product at Allegis Group. Been with the company about 13 years, and Allegis Group itself is one of the largest staffing companies in the world, with over 12.2 billion, 3 billion in revenue, and talent solutions that span the globe at over 500 locations. So we offer services, mostly staffing, but also services and professional in the law, engineering, commercial, you name it, we have our hand in it. So we started off with HFM, so that kind of is going to be my kickoff for where we are with FCC. Is we've been on FCC for about a year and a month, but we started with HFM back in 2015. So our migration was from the ground to the cloud, and it was on all products because of the fact that we do have EPPCS for instances of that, along with FCCS, TRCS, EDMCS. So our EPM footprint is very large, and it does cover all of our businesses. So all of our businesses use planning, all of our businesses use FCCS and TRCS along with EDMCS. So that's kind of where we're coming from. The size of the application, from the HFM perspective, we knew we were going to be very large. We did end up using all 4 custom dimensions within the FCC tool, and we have at this point almost 380 entities and 1,600 accounts in the application. And then again, we utilize all 4 custom dimensions. And so that's Allegis Group and me.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate it. Would you go ahead and give a little bit of introduction of yourself as well, Rich?
It's great to be here. I've been with Hyperion, now Oracle, since 2000. So I started on HFM back when it first came out. And I've always been working in the financial close area. So currently I'm responsible for both on-prem as well as cloud across all the financial close. And it's just great to be here today. I like to hear these stories. I like to interact with our customers and people on the call, answer any questions that I have, and quite honestly, just participate in whatever way possible. So it's great to be here today. And, I apologize once again for not being on camera, but trust me, it's for your benefit.
Thank you, Richard. Richard, I really appreciate that. as I mentioned earlier, John Holman from CVR was supposed to join us as well. Unfortunately, he's unable to join us today. We do have a few quotes from him that we will kind of roll into, when we are having this conversation around, what different components that, address how the different components of the consolidation process were addressed throughout the implementation. With that, we're going to jump straight into the discussion about FCCS. And the the EPM implementation at both Cardtronics as well as Allegis Group. So for let me start with you, Richard. Why Cloud EPM? From a transitions perspective, you guys were on a on-prem Hyperion products and before, right? So talk a little bit about tell me a little bit about why Cardtronics as a organization decided to go with the cloud solutions.
So I think the biggest factor is definitely cloud, right? Just you no longer need to maintain anything from your own backyard and everything. Taking advantage of the hardware. But from a features perspective, now looking back, is we definitely have took advantage of a lot of the kind of roll forward, overrides, and then process standpoint. Like in the if you like background like similar to John and I, HFM automation is probably not a thing, right? So you cannot script a whole lot of things. But now with FCCS, definitely you got all this EPM automates and help you kind of automate a lot of process. But roll forwards, overrides, all this used to be rules in HFM. It's very complex rule in our HFM world. Now we basically on our FCCS instance, we have no rules to maintain. So everything is, we just go with whatever Oracle on FCCS setup is. So in a way, less maintenance, less auditing points, right? So those are good, I guess, advantage, thinking in going to FCCS. And on top of that, we're not just, lifting and ship HFM to FCCS, because part of it is we also implementing, the ERP/GL cloud, Oracle. So that's kind of like, come hand to hand. And with that, it comes with a lot of out of the box, adapter, easy to integrate. So I mean, there's many benefits, just as part of the whole ERP cloud EPM project. So that's
That's
awesome.
a great point. That's a great point, Richard. Thank you. I mean, I think that's one of the driving factor that we hear from clients all over. When they're moving to the cloud, they're not just moving from EPM perspective, right? They're moving from a holistic organizational strategical change to going to the cloud. John, a little bit, from your perspective, why cloud? Similarly, what I asked Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Rami. It is identical to Richard's, right? So when you looked at our HFM and planning implementations on premise, we were maintaining 3 environments because we wanted to have lower environments for testing, even load testing, to make sure that everything was going to run fine when you made a certain change, or specifically a dimensionality change. So we were maintaining multiple servers. Now, this isn't something that our customers see, from our user perspective, but from a IS perspective, you've got multiple databases at that point. You've got multiple Windows machines, and you're configuring all this equipment and networking, storage, right? Because our HFM implementation was very large, along with also the planning environments. Before we'd done a kind of a redo, it was incredibly large. So we were using close to a terabyte of data to store everything. So maintaining in the cloud was kind of a no-brainer. We were partially in a transition of, do we upgrade? And at the same time, we were going to have to upgrade our systems as well, because we were on a certain OS platform. So you have to measure all those different pieces of OS, database, right? And you're patching now your Oracle Linux database. You're going to patch your database itself. You're going to, so the amount of patching going on, the amount of maintenance. When you think about it, and Allegis Group itself has also started a cloud strategy to move as much to the cloud as possible. So once we were at that point where we had to actually upgrade our servers and HFM, we said this should actually be a slam dunk. We don't want to be in this business anymore. We want to utilize the cloud. and take all those benefits, such as Richard spoke about, like automation. The EPM Automate tool, while there's APIs available, there's also the EPM Automate tool that makes it, drop simple to almost recreate what we have with HFM and our planning tools. So that was, and also the footprint on-prem now is just one machine, right? Well, two,
Yeah.
if you use a test and load server, but yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great point. I think, and both of you organizations were using HFM prior, right? So, from that perspective, what are some of the features in FCCS that you guys looked at early on or have been using for a number of months, years now? What are some of the features that you think really changed your implementation and consolidation processes, if you will, Richard?
Yeah, I think kind of touched on that earlier. So definitely see the roll forward and the override process, right? So like I said, we used to have rules just to, bring the override, roll forward the year, and then also all those different spot rates and historical rate transaction. We have to write rules within it. But obviously, not every shop would have ERP Cloud behind the scene that have some of the features. Like for example, where we came from on the Great Plains today, I mean, it's not much you can do, but that's why HFM's become a very kind of customizable consolidated solution. And I mean, I'm not saying FCCS you cannot do that, but we didn't take advantage of it just because we can do a lot of those historical rate translation and roll forward over in roll forward actually done it in FCCS of the way the account dimensions are being built. So, but definitely some of the translation in terms of historical rate are actually handled in the Oracle side GOO. So that's become I don't know if it's advantage features in FCCS, but definitely it's something we have considered on. So.
But thanks, Richard. I think I know one of the times that we utilize the roll forward or even the override function a lot. I remember is doing the historical data loads and coming from HFM where you have calculated all of that stuff and then you want to bring that into FCCS. I think we had definitely the whole override process was simplified from that perspective, if I remember correctly. John, from your perspective, what are some of the features that you guys are seeing at Allegis that are helping you compared to HFM?
I think they're a lot like Richard. So the roll forward, that's been I would say like the biggest piece for us, but it obviously HFM came with it, but you had to write the calc yourself, right? You had to, and that's where there's a difference here, is that it's supposed to be kind of hands off with FCC. For those that have seen the documentation, seen the videos outlining how the application works and what it's besides its cloud strategy, also its simplistic kind of nature of being able to just do it out of the box. I think that's where we're trying to get to, and that's what our biggest benefit at this point was the fact that it's in the cloud and then it does kind of come out of the box. Everything kind of just works. Because of the dimensionality and the way that it's structured, and then we just have to fit ourselves into that structure. And we don't have any. We only have one custom role, right, at that point. So it's kind of been a slam dunk to. And also, our position was to try and do lift and shift. So being able to just say, okay, do we have to write any custom rules? Well, let's see, and do the analysis on that, and then find out that at this point, we didn't. Where there's some positives and negatives of that, but that was kind of our advantages and our features that we saw moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, John, that we'll touch a little bit on a little bit later as well. There are other features that I know both of you guys have considered not implemented at this point, and maybe I'll let Rich Wilkie talk a little bit more about the features differences between HFM and FCCS.
Yeah, first of all, I think it's great to hear about people taking advantage of that out of the box functionality. That's definitely something we tried very hard to build into financial consolidation and close, and really eliminate that need for people to have to write tons and tons of EB script like you had to do in HFM. Certainly, we have that capability for people to write those custom rules. I think John said you have one, but our goal is to minimize people's need to customize and really take advantage of the best practices we built in. other things that we've done, right? We've, things like data management, supplemental data management, task management are all, just natively part of the product now. They're not separate like in HFM world, totally integrated. So from a user perspective, it really flows easily. Next generation reporting available in the cloud now today, really, we've evolved FR to a new point with what we call management reporting or just reporting. Enterprise journals is something we just came out with, that ability to create journal entries and post them back to the general ledger. So we're really advancing what we're doing in the cloud. There's a lot of capabilities above and beyond just say core consolidations, and I think those are things that people can grow into. So maybe you don't need them right away. Some of these guys, they haven't looked at those capabilities, but there'll be a need at some point, and they can just enable those and go with them. So we're always looking to holistically complete the solution, but it's great to hear that our core principles of out-of-the-box best practices are something everyone's adopting.
Thanks, Rich. Those are some of the great points. I mean, those were some of the items that I was also going to touch on. At CVR, also we had similar conversations as you guys are talking about. They were also coming from HFM. They also had some really intrinsic intercompany transaction rules and so on and so forth. So we did utilize a lot of those insertion points that you are talking about, John, at CVR to get their systems to kind of match it up with the HFM functionality. So that's, I think, the one big thing that a lot of times people think that, hey, this is a pre-built solution, it's a black box, I don't know what's going on inside, but there is a lot of ability for you to modify some of the things. And then one of the additional piece, Rich, you can also speak out to it, is the on-demand rule functionality that was brought into FCCS recently as well. One of the things I wanted to, before I jump into a follow-up here, I wanted to kind of point out that the chat window is open. If you have any questions throughout these conversations, please post them into the chat window. We'll try to answer as many of those questions as possible throughout this conversation. But I just wanted to remind everybody that they by all means, just go into the chat window, post your questions over there if you have any throughout the conversation.
Rami, one thing I want to add on these features, question that you have is like, of course, we're in the accounting, closing consolidation. We always not trying to be very creative on some of this stuff, right? But I think one of the good thing that, from business user impact standpoint, because coming from HFM to FCCS, I think the adaptation of it is a lot easier. And obviously, you cannot think of FCC as HFM because the backend engine is a bit different. But overall, I think Oracle tried their best to kind of make it very similar to HFM. So I think those are where some of the attraction coming in from FCC's perspective. So you don't have to have it's not like you're learning a brand new tool, but there's some correlation toward from a user perspective. So that's just some point I want to add.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a good segue into the follow-on conversation that I wanted to have about the process changes that you had to deal with when you go from something like HFM to FCCS. Obviously, I can personally speak about clients where we have gone from a completely manual Excel-based processes into a FCCS, where the process changes are drastic, right? The entire mindset is changed from going into an Excel file and changing your numbers and not having the audit details and to provide all the supplemental data and all of that stuff. Going into FCCS, that obviously changes their whole process. It's more streamlined. You have more process control over it, so on and so forth. How was that for you guys, John, when you go from HFM to FCCS from a business process standpoint, and the user adoption issues like what Richard was talking about?
I would say that user adoption, because we were already on HFM and we were already using SmartView, I think that the adoption was less difficult than it had to be. But I think that the process did change for them, right? And also for us, because, and this is where one of the small negatives comes in, is that HFM was customizable. So we had things in HFM that we now do not have in FCCS. And that was both by design, and also some of it was we wanted to do it, but we could not, right? And then we'll talk about some of that a little bit later. But I think adoption was as straightforward as it could have been, just simply because the tool sets were identical and the dimensionality was almost identical as well.
Yeah, yeah. Richard, I know you obviously just talk about a little bit from a adoption standpoint, from a business process or consolidation process standpoint. Did anything change between HFM and FCCS for you guys?
Not really. I mean, on that, obviously, the process become more visible, right? Because it is the source is no longer is Oracle GL Cloud. From the first few months that we going into the new tool consolidation, time have improved, but then of course now that we in 2 years we slowly seeing some extension in terms of consolidation time, but something probably we can work with you guys just to see how we can improve some of those. But we do see some consolidation time deterioration slowly. Probably is due to the size as we growing, and then the amount of data is on there. So something that we can look at. But other than that, I mean, impact wise, it's not a whole lot other than, I mean, like I said earlier, I'm able to utilize the EPM automate that batching so that a lot of things can be automated.
Yeah, it makes sense. And there is an obvious difference between HFM and FCCS, and that's on the dimensionality side, right? In the dimensions in HFM, where you were looking to find the elimination numbers and where you were looking to find translation numbers and all of those components, there is a little bit of a training. Was there any challenges from that perspective for either of your organizations, where having to try to explain to people that, hey, in HFM, you went into this particular POV to get this number. Now the POV, it differs a little bit when you go to the point of view differs a little bit when you go to the FCCS world.
Oh, definitely. That's, I mean, everybody's so, I mean, HFM, I mean, especially for Cardtronics, we have been on it for more than 5 years. So people are so used to how consolidation on the value dimension, the consolidation dimension, how it works, and all this are changing. So, I mean, it's benefit for the S-based engine behind the scene, right? So that's a transition have to make, but eventually people would get used to it. I mean, people used to seeing, this triangulation, things going on, but it's no longer because the way the translation are done, not just, I mean, logic-wise, a bit different, right? Just the dimensionality. So that's a transition. It took even my team a while to get used to it. That's just live and breathe in HFM. I mean, for many years. So that's something
right.
we have to get used to.
Yeah, yeah. Anything like that on your end, John, where HFM and versus the FCCS from a not just from a dimensionality standpoint, but like what Richard touched on, right? The translation values are different in different places, and now you have parent adjustments in there, and then all of those different components that people did not have ability to do before, and now they have the ability to do, and then now they have more data to go find. Any kind of issues there from a transition standpoint?
I definitely say it was a learning curve, for sure. And like I said, it takes a long time to get used to it and understand where your data is, how to go get it. I know that we looked at a number of flowcharts and videos provided by Oracle to understand the consolidation process, because it was so dramatically different from HFM. But once we got there, and once we understood the reporting currencies and the other natures of the application and how it does do the elimination and the consolidation, I think that we've gotten there. But it was a journey for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I personally can attest to that. Every implementation we do, that is the first thing that we talk about, is exactly where all the data is. And that flow chart that you're talking about, that's one thing that I have to applaud Oracle on, having a very detailed documentation on exactly how those numbers are moving when you are running your consolidation process, right? All of those different components, how numbers are moving from one place to another place, and you are able to trace it. So even though it is a so-called black box process where we don't have access to the underlying code as how the consolidation is working, we can actually see the impact of it directly in the data. So it makes it easier for us to understand, where something is going awry. So Going from HFM to FCCS, obviously FCCS is your more or less the system of records, if you will. How much history did you guys end up loading in your consolidation environment?
I'll let John go first.
Yeah.
Sure. So we bought 3 years historically in, and we were trying to close one while we were going through. We were more than halfway through, so it's almost 4 years was being brought into the application. And from a perspective of understanding your data, with us bringing in that many years, like Richard said, the more data you bring to the application, the more it's going to be, you're going to notice performance degradation. It's minor, right, as you move forward. But for us, what we saw was that once you put in a year or two, you're going to know how you're going to be performing on a day-to-day, month-to-month, right? So that's something that I would say if you're bringing in 1 or 2 years, definitely, or if you're only bringing in, say, 2, maybe bring in 3 just to see how the, in one of your lower environments to see how the application is going to perform. So you can understand how to properly use your dimensionality. Are you going to extend it to 4? Are you going to use certain features? Because that is an issue. And then we did leverage an ASO cube to store all of our other prior years.
Yeah, it's very similar to how we ended up doing it in Cardtronics as well, right? So we ended up loading a lot of the historical data, and that's one of the process that we have replicated in a lot of places, Richard, where we come in, take the HFM history, go back as far as you need to go, and load that into the ASO cube, and then have FCCS have a couple of years of history, so you're still able to do some sort of trending analysis directly from FCCS and so on and so forth. So from your perspective, Richard, how much data did we end? I'm not recalling how much we loaded in the FCCS at Cardtronics.
It's very similar to John, right? I mean, of course, when you approach a user, they would want to keep as much as they want, right? But the reality is your reporting requirements, right? So it's really trying to compare, prior year, history. So 3 years what we kept, but we also have an underlying space cube that houses all of, the historical data. Keep in mind that we also going through like a chart of account conversion. So 3 years kind of the starting point to kind of make sense, because you don't want your project to turn out to be a reconciliation exercise, right? and so that's the starting point that we have. And then what we have done actually is work very closely with the accounting team, just to kind of let them understand, the data retention requirements, from HFM, because you would want to keep your HFM instance online for a certain period of time until you can truly decommission HFM. So make sure your counterpart when using and understand, the historical reporting requirement, and then the S-Base ASO cube definitely it's a a handy little Swiss Army knife that we have just to allow all this historical reporting to continue.
Yeah, and I think that was another thing that I wanted to kind of highlight here, Richard, a little bit. I know, you talked about all the different components from EPM stacks that we implemented. I think one of the first implementation of EPRCS was Cardtronics, where we combined FCCS data, planning data, ASO reporting cube that was sitting in a OAC cloud S-Base environment. So I think that was one of the things that kind of helps, from that perspective. A little bit, you guys both talked about it, from a reporting standpoint, and Rich earlier alluded to the management reporting component, which is similar to what EPRCS is. Any challenges from a reporting standpoint, migrating reports from on-prem environment into cloud, FR changes, financial reporting studio changes, or anything like that your team had to deal with? And I'm talking about an administrator's perspective here, right? Not an end user's perspective. John, we'll start with you here.
Yeah, sure. From an administrator perspective, we did leverage the Perficient team to assist us with migrating all of our reports, because again, we've been on HFM, we've been closing it as an organization, in a consolidation tool, and Perficient made it seamless, to be honest. And then all the other ones that we had to do ourselves, started utilizing the Report Web Studio, which we were using on the old tool install, which everyone just loves. So it's definitely gotten better, and I would say that our migration was a success, and it was as quick as I thought it could be. We and the Perficient team did a great job of migrating all the ones that we'd asked for. We were able to clean up some stuff as usual when you do like this type of move. So I would say that it was a success, and everyone saw the benefit of using the Web Studio for sure.
What about you guys, Richard? I know we kind of did a dual migration at Cardtronics. We had a FR Studio reporting that we migrated, as well as migration of some FR reports into the PRCS tool.
Yeah, I think kind of looking back, it was pretty painful from an implementation phase of that. But once everything went live, of course, things are going smoothly. But just recall the implementation, definitely. I mean, we're trying to take advantage of the space cloud service that we subscribe as well. So we try to use this opportunity to reduce the number of HFM license that we have, right? So we end up converting a lot of report that is sourced from HFM and then make it point to the space cube, especially if it's more the internal management report, right? If it's for external, we want to make it stay in FCCS just so that we know that's the source of it. So, but just kind of definitely talk to the user group, make sure, because you're going to find out a lot of kind of those one-off report that they maintain, with the HS-GET formula. All of a sudden they all service up, and when they would service up is when you're trying to get them to go through UAT. All of a sudden they bring up this report. What about this report? What about that report? So definitely go just reach out and just really understand the day-to-day as well. So and just trying to convert as much report you can to the EPLCS as much as possible, so that we don't have to deal with some of the offline report. But you're going to find some, but hopefully involve different region controller and get to trying to get them bring out the report during the close. Really understand the close process on the end. So.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I asked that question, right? Very few projects I've worked on where it's not painful. Right, especially when you are doing a migration of this nature. First of all, you're going to have pain points from auditors. You're going to have pain points from your controller's office. You're going to have pain points from your reporting, external, internal reporting folks, and so on and so forth. So I appreciate that, Richard, you saying, pointing out that fact that the pain points are there. You have the ability to manage them, but at the same time, being able to still use the same, functionality that you were used to from a SmartView standpoint or FR standpoint. I mean, a lot of the functionalities, they are on parity, right? So there is a way for you to transition from an HFM HS-GET formula to, FCCS HS-GET formulas or SPACE HS-GET formulas. Obviously, there are some dimensionality differences, but they are very easy to manage and transition over. Rich, real quick, from a reporting standpoint, what's your thought in terms of how management report plays a role versus FR Studio, and where Oracle is headed from that direction?
So management reports, which is now actually just called reports, is really the next generation for reporting. And actually, we recommend people, if they're starting new projects, they use that. I know a lot of people are comfortable and familiar with FR, but the reality is that management reports gives you much better functionality. And it's really all of the features that people have asked to be done in FR that just technically were not possible. You can migrate your reports all over, so it's not like you have to recreate these reports. You can migrate all your reports, but this is definitely something where, the capabilities of it are pretty great. We don't have time here to go into all the capabilities, but certainly there's a bunch of Customer Connect webcasts and other, documentation. But definitely, if you've ever wondered, well, how come we haven't improved FR? We have. You just, go take a look at what we've done with management reports.
Thanks, Rich. One of the things that I wanted to ask you guys when I asked you about the historical data load, and I'm going to first talk about my experience with multiple projects, and then get your guys' opinion on it. I have seen that doing the historical loads into FCCS does add effort to your project because it's not the simple fact of just taking the data from your legacy processes or systems and loading into FCCS and just making yeah, it's all good and move on. There's a significant number of amount of effort that goes into from the client's perspective, from a customer's perspective, right? Because we, as an implementer, come in, we take your data, we put it in a new system, we tie it and take it to best of our abilities, but we don't know your data as well as you do, right? And in a few projects where we have either gone from HFM to FCCS or gone from manual Excel-based processes to FCCS, we have noticed that the data validation has to be done at a very detailed level, has to be thoroughly certified, right? So what was your experience from that perspective, Richard?
Well, for us, as we talked about, we actually go through a chart of account migration. So that itself introduced another hurdle we have to jump across. So that we end up creating like our own conversion process from HFM and then get to FCCS, and then we do end up creating tie out validation templates to make sure everything's checks. But that conversion exercise, yeah, it's quite time consuming, and we really have spent our project team, leadership team, to actually put that as a very big phase of the project to make sure everything done tie out and validated by a special user, kind of a subject matter expert on each respective region to come in and represent for that. So just to make sure, also talk to the internal audit team just to make sure everything satisfied from a data title standpoint. You don't just want to go thinking this is just your title is good. So make sure you involve auditor yeah, I think every company may have different flavor. I really cannot speak for the HFM just strictly from FCCS. I know when you guys come in, you guys trying to introduce it that it's a tool and all that, but since the case does not fit in our project, so we didn't really have opportunity on that, so we cannot speak for it. So for us, is really a cumbersome project because you just have to jump from chart of account to chart of account. So, but that's kind of our story behind it.
Right. John, from your perspective, it was more or less no changes on the chart of accounts perspective, right? So how was the data validation effort?
So I think that is probably the largest component of it, is being able to bring your HFM data up. We had rules that would say if year equals X in HFM, do Y with the data. So there were certain points where you had to, and the analysis at the beginning, and also picking your year, will show you, and also looking at that rule to understand, okay, was there an acquisition that year? Did data come in that was, we had to make multiple currency adjustments because they were using different rates? Like, you have a lot of questions to ask yourself and analysis to do before you move the data in and understand what adjustments you'll need to make. And so I think that's the largest component of it. But once we were on a steady stream and once the analysis was done, and I make it seem small, it's not. Once that's done, then it does become just refreshing those validation sheets.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I remember Richard being part of that process of having to reload FCCS almost on a daily basis because the mapping from chart of account to chart of account was changing so often. And it's the nature of the beast, right? When you redesign your chart of accounts, you're going to have to go through that process, and your people are going to find, well, you take this company code and this account and put it over here. And then a couple of weeks later, somebody else says, that's wrong. You got to go put it back where it was. So we had to go through a lot of that process. But that is one thing that I have to say. The whole data loading process, with the help of EPM Automate, we were able to load that data pretty frequently and recalculate all of the historical consolidation values on a very consistent basis. So we didn't slow the project down trying to figure out where the data was and why it was taking so long to load and so on and so forth. So we talked about all these different components, right? Let's get to the meat and potatoes of it. Performance. I know Richard touched on it a little bit. there is you will hear on the internet, you will hear on the forums, user forums, all the different kind of answers and questions about performance. So let's start with Richard first. Compared to HFM, you touched a little bit on it already, but compared to HFM, what do you think FCCS's performance is in terms of consolidation?
I think it's slightly better than HFM just from a time perspective, but have to get a fair share for HFM. There's HFM instance that we do have rules behind the scene and all of that, but now we just leverage all the strict consolidation, and elimination process. So we do, like, what the time we go live, like I said earlier, the amount of data may be a factor. I think we saw 20 minutes consolidation time, compared to, when back in HFM, we may have, about 25, 30 minutes, depends on, amount of changes of the data. So, but at this point, we starting to see some, like I said, deterioration. Some consolidation, if there's a lot of changes on the data cell, it sometimes get to 40 minutes. But we haven't seen anything more than 45 minutes or so. But once in a while, there may be, from an Oracle Cloud instance, maybe hiccup that would slow things down. We may see like longer, but in average, it's about 30 minutes consolidation time, and,
Okay.
and it's about a par with HFM.
Okay. John, your story is very different. So what do you think about FCCS consolidation, time wise?
So consolidation time-wise, it's almost identical, right? And it actually has gone up a little bit, but that really has to do with our design and our lift and shift move. But our journey was like this: we started the process of migrating the data in, and we immediately saw an issue with the data set size, right? Using 4 custom dimensions and having all of that data. And it's a heavy application. So we ended up having to go to the consolidate by view process. So we had to both reload data and also reconsolidate data. And again, remember, we brought in those 3 years. So we're having to kind of reload that data in a couple of different times and then change our processing to then finally, but right after we went live, within a half a year, we moved to the DSO queue. Not because of consolidation times, as you pointed out, because again, they stayed roughly the same as HFM. Now, and also from a backstory of the HFM, our HFM cube was highly tuned. I think I lived in that HFM optimization, performance optimization guide, right? I know DBAs personally that I would call right on their cell phones because we figured out a way to tune the database that we could get this done and get it done well, and make our close be able to load 6, 7, and 9 times a day, right? So we were expecting the same performance with FCC. We got it, but only after kind of a long road. Then when it comes to the application size, that's where I mentioned that a half a year in, we moved to DSO as soon as we could. It was the large project. We knew we had to do it because the size of our database was so large that it was impacting things like just a restructure, right? So if you wanted to add an account, because that was one of the dense dimensions, you had to fire off that restructure, and it took some time, right? We saw a 70% reduction, 65% reduction in timing on the restructure. That was amazing, as well as also the maintenance window went from, it was an hour and 45 or 2 hours back down to 45 where we'd hoped to have it, right? So having a global application, we couldn't tell folks in APAC, hey, you have a 2-hour window where the application's down. We could say, hey, look, at the lunch hour, it's down, right? Which is, and it's a 24-hour app, so it's just kind of our window. So that's kind of where we were. Is consolidation times have remained roughly the same that we would expect from HFM, if not a little bit more. But our maintenance window and our consolidation and refresh and restructure times have come down, like I said, 60% since moving to DSO.
Yeah, so there is a lot of buzzwords in this conversation, right? DSO, dense dimension. Rich, explain to us what does all that mean?
So we introduced a feature back in August. So it's been out now for 7 months. That basically we were optimizing performance, and so we call it DSO, dense sparse optimizations. Effectively, what we're doing is we're just We put a whole bunch of smart people into a room and basically said, you guys figure out how we can optimize performance. What are the ways that we can make things better? How can we, like everything John said, how can we make maintenance quicker? How can we make consolidations quicker? How can we do all of, shrink application size so backups are quicker? And the outcome of that was this DSO. I would say right now about a third of our customers have made the migration. Quite honestly, it's a one-button migration, so it isn't like earth-shatteringly difficult to do. It's just people, like Richard, have to fit that into their schedule. But the benefits are massive, right? I mean, I was just talking to a customer yesterday. A 15-minute consolidation went to a minute and a half. Like these are the things that happen, right? These are the improvements that we're talking about. So it's been out for 8 months. We really want all our customers to get to it. But for anyone who, and honestly, all of our applications now are at or faster than HFM. So we don't have anyone where we're slower than HFM, assuming that they're using DSO. So we feel really good about performance, and we're only going to get better.
Thank you, Richard. And I kind of wanted to add a couple of bullet points over there as well, right? We have done many FCCS implementation migrations, and recently we are ourselves starting to see the immense benefits of these dense, sparse, optimized cubes. All the new applications we are building are all DSO enabled, right? We are making sure that it's beyond it's the default setup going forward from our perspective, from an implementation partner's perspective, right? The other thing that really quickly we wanted to touch on from a DSO standpoint is when you have custom calculations, and this is kind of going back to your environment, John, right? We build custom calculations for FCCS considering a specific dense dimension, it being in a specific place. And I'm kind of going a little bit into the weeds about technology and underlying components. Did you guys have to do any major adjustment to those calculations for DSO to work right?
So ours was on demand, right? So it wasn't in line, right? It wasn't insertion, right? We had to abandon it because we tried our best to get it to work the way that we had it. So we ended up just moving to a data management model on the process, right? So still automatable, still doable basically, and also the speed went up. Like we increased our performance in running the calculation, but instead just using data management instead. So that's where we were. We had to drop the actual calc.
Yeah, so going to cloud, I mean, obviously there are some benefits that we talked about early on, but are there any other benefits that you have seen I'm talking overall EPM cloud perspective, right? Being on a cloud, what benefits have you seen yourselves?
Yeah, the strong point on the cloud is definitely the data management, right? Because all of this adapter is very thoroughly built, and so I mean it's very easy to integrate between different cloud system, and so obviously we also implement EDMCS just because we are not a classic HFM shop. We more EPMA HFM shop, so we heavily rely on EPMA. So EDMCS becomes kind of like our replacement for the EPMA part of the the on-prem part of the metadata management. Yeah, I think integration wise is make it a lot easier for us. So less of the file. With that, I think latest with planning coming out with this freeform, S-Space Cube, that actually would help us too with getting out of the S-Space cloud side of the world. So that's I think something we are right now looking at as well. But I mean, but I'm jumping to planning with that regard. So, but FCCS wise, I mean, yeah, EPM overall, that's a lot of great things in terms of making easy to integrate, and then integration wise. And
right. What about you, John? What do you think about cloud versus you've been living in the HFM on-prem for a long time. Where do you see the benefits?
I think we see the benefits in a similar area. We were using FDME with HFM as well as DRM. So when we moved to the cloud, we saw the benefits of being able to utilize EDMCS, which I think is actually a great product. We've had a lot of success with it, being able to push to 4 different planning applications, being able to have folks make one update to the entity structure and it flow down and subscribe down to the other applications has been tremendous. I would say that, and also the monthly patching, being able to get notification, run replay commands to validate that everything's still working in our test environment, but yet receive enhancements monthly and or quarterly that are a benefit to the teams. Some things we might not have time to implement right away, but other things like EPM automate commands will pop up every once in a while. We're like, oh yeah, hey, we can use that. And being able to then throw that into our coding, our scripting, PowerShell scripting, it has been tremendous, right? So I would say that from a patching perspective, along with also just the cloud nature of the application. But otherwise, we kind of did just do our best to lift and shift. We were already using DRM, but otherwise, yeah, those are probably the biggest benefits for us.
Yeah, John, I think that's a good point. Monthly patches, like I love it and I hate it. Like when I hate it is I have to deal with it every month. But the thing is, you have some cool stuff coming out as well. But sometimes we asking like, should we have a quarterly patch? And then you turn out, sometime monthly patch has some good thing and you want to utilize it. So some of this stuff you just have to work with Oracle. I mean, I think that's part of the nice thing is on the cloud. The EPM cloud is now you have Oracle behind the scene that would be willing to work with you just to kind of get stuff out there compared to on-prem, and it just you can sometimes lock down with just limited support. I think on in terms of features and stuff like that.
For sure. Well, sorry, Roman, not to interrupt, but I also had my Perficient PM, Matt Hopkins, ping me on like a Monday night. He was like, "Hey, did you turn up all that on-prem stuff?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What, are you completely decommissioned?" I'm like, "I think so. Why?" And he's like, "Well, there's a 0 day that came out," and I'm like, "Oh." But I didn't have to worry about it because our on-prem stuff had been decommissioned. So that 0 day vulnerability never even crossed our mind because Oracle had already taken care of it. So that is a huge benefit, like Richard was saying.
Absolutely, that makes a big it makes a big difference. One of the things that I want to highlight here in terms of the patching cycle, right? New components come out and you are not forced into using them, right? They are default setting for most of those new features is off. You can go play with it in your test environment, make sure it works for you before you go and use it. One last question. I know we are running short on time and everybody has to run, but if you had to do this all over again, what would you change?
So I'll go first. So we would have done a proof of concept on our data set.
Okay.
And we would have realized that where we didn't have parity, like things like being able to use constant currency, having multiple, like we had many alternate hierarchies for entity. Some of these things are just not possible because FCCS is meant for eliminations and consolidations. It shouldn't necessarily become the reporting tool for your organization, especially if you have a large amount of dimensions. You should only bring up, in my opinion, and I think the way it was built was only to do those 2 things and do them very well, which they do, like we've mentioned before. But proof of concept your data set, right? If you say lift and shift, try lift and shift first. Give yourself that extra month. It's hard to do, but give yourself some time so that way you can analyze and understand how the data should look up in that product and then be pushed to other products. For instance, if you want to push eliminations to another product, do that, right, for reporting. Things of that nature is understand the full breadth of your products, understand what each one's supposed to do. Because if your data set is large, FCCS can handle it, but it's going to be a journey that you and also like Richard said and we see here is that over time it'll get a little bit slower just because the data set's going to grow.
Right. What about you, Richard? What would you change if you had to, hindsight, look at back and say, oh, we should have done that a little bit different?
You want to send people grab lunch and come back first, or But in short, I mean, if I would have done it all over again, I mean, by nature, I think just because I think that I'm not sure the audience background, but both John and I come off from a HFM, application going to FCCS. I think there's a lot of expectation that biasly set up that thinking FCCS is HFM. but reality is not. So what I would probably do is really truly lay out all your function that you have customized today in HFM, and then just kind of map it out, right? That's it. How does it work in FCCS? Like some of the things we talked about, we end up spending a lot of time doing data mining and all of that, thinking, okay, oh, I thought it's supposed to work like FCC is supposed to work like HFM, but in reality, it's not. With that, also come out with the movement dimension, right? So that's where the cash flow report comes to play. So I'm wishing we can involve, that side of the house earlier, because many shops I've been to that helping other folks is cash flow usually is an offline process, and then but movement dimension that helps introduce that to become more system driven process. So I wish I can involve my controller earlier just to understand their cash flow process, so that we can map out the movement dimension to see what can be done. It's one of those kind of like I wish I could have done this way of time, but then now we just went cutting short in our project's time, and then again we're not able to really truly utilize all the movement dimension. But I think this is something I would go back and start this process much earlier, and especially often our business partner are always busy with closing and all that. You only can get so much of their time, so just get that out as early as possible if you have that offline process going.
I appreciate it, you guys. I know we went about 4 or 5 minutes over. Thank you for your participation. Thank you everybody for attending the event. If you have any questions, by all means, reach out to us.